In the last episode, we got word that a Bajoran resistance leader called Lee Nalas, long thought dead, was possibly being kept in a Cardigan labour camp on one of their planets. Well, I say we got word, but what we actually got was an airing, and through pretty dodgy means. That was enough for Kira, though, who decided she wanted to try and rescue him. There's a bit more to it than altruism, as she thinks he can help with Bajor's current political problem. The provisional government isn't particularly popular at the moment, and things are creeping ever closer to civil war, something not helped by groups like the Circle. They're a movement largely based on their enjoyment of being racist assholes, and they're causing issues on the station, too. Grabbing Lee Nalas goes well, as long as you ignore all the dead people, and we get him back to the station just in time for Gul Dukat to call and pass on a formal apology for the prisoners they're not supposed to be keeping anymore. The legendary leader turns out to be just some guy who shot an unarmed Cardigan one time, but that's arguably still better than what we've got, so despite Lee Nalas himself being hesitant about the whole thing, Sisko convinces him to give it a shot. The Bajoran government itself doesn't quite seem to know how to respond to this and does what governments do best, put the problem as far away as possible while paying it lip service and wait for some bugger else to solve it. That's how Lee Nalas ends up back on Deep Space Nine as the new official government liaison, which is a bit of a problem as that's Kira's job, so she's being taken back to Bajor. Let's rejoin them and see how this awful plan works out for all involved. Sisko's not impressed at the situation and makes it clear, in private, to the minister who brought the news. Unfortunately, the minister has manoeuvred things pretty well and can bat away Sisko's complaints. Lee Nalas being here is a compliment because he's a hero, and this is the safest place as things are getting worse in the capital. Another minister took a pasting recently, an attack attributed to the Circle, so they don't want to risk keeping Lee Nalas there. And Kira's getting a promotion for bringing back a hero. Quite where she's getting promoted to hasn't been decided yet, but she clearly deserves it. The minister knows there aren't any good counter-arguments to the excuses he's given, and, after fiddling with Sisko's ball, leaves him to simmer at how things are playing out. Not for long, though, as he's called to his quarters by Jake. The Circle aren't just escalating their activities on Bajor, and they want Sisko to know it. Let's move to someone else having a bad day. Odo's visiting Kira and is surprised to find her packing. He expected her to fight this in the same way that she's always fought things she didn't agree with. This is different, though. She's under no illusions that it's punishment for going ahead with the rescue of Lee Nalas when her government told her to keep out of it, and it's not like she can just stay here and carry on without their approval. The doorbell heralds the arrival of Dax, who's come to have pretty much the same conversation about finding a way for Kira to stay. Dax is followed by Bashir, who is followed by O'Brien, who is followed by Quark, all of whom have apparently come to chat without informing each other. That's what Bashir says anyway. The final visitor is Vedek Bareil, the guy who helped us out last season when Vedek Sin, the Delphic douchebag, decided to try and stir up problems. He's here to offer support as well, but in a slightly different way. He thinks Kira could stay at his monastery on Bajor while she figures out what to do, and she takes him up on the offer. The last pair to see her before she leaves are Lee Nalas, who apologises for how things have turned out and says he didn't want the job, and Sisko, who promises that he's going to find a way to bring her back. Being in a monastery is a bit of a mixed bag for Kira. On the one hand, she's struggling with peaceful reflection here, mostly because she's still pissed off about everything, and that doesn't help spiritual matters. On the other, Vedek Bareil is making some hints that his interest goes beyond her religious well-being, and it doesn't look like she's entirely opposed to the behaviour. Maybe that influences his next choice, or maybe it's just him doing his job as a religious leader, but either way she's led further into the monastery. He's decided she should have a go on one of those shiny things from the pilot, the orbs that aren't orbs, responsible for causing visions in the user. In her case, it's a jumble of people she knows making muffled noise, and first Dax, then Bareil, telling her to listen, though it's implied they're talking about the prophets rather than the distractions around her. Perhaps the prophets think clothes get in the way of focusing, which is why Kira, and then Bareil, appear stark bollock naked. As he leans in for some sexy times, the vision ends, suggesting the shiny thing is less of a cerulean orb and more of a blue ball. Odo has connections on Bajor, and one of them is telling him that things are getting worse. No fatalities yet from the sounds of things, but these Circle lads are handing out violence like it's on sale, and tracking them down is proving to be very difficult indeed. Almost like they're being warned by somebody with connections, thinks Odo. Quark comes in while the guy on the call talks about troops getting involved before hanging up. That just confirms Quark's suspicions, as he believes this whole thing is now a lost cause and plans to skedaddle. He's heard from his contacts that the Circle are being armed by outside forces, a species called the Krasari to be precise, and that probably means bringing in the military won't be the quick solution that everybody thinks. By a handy coincidence, there's a Krasari ship on the way, due to arrive in a couple of days, and Odo thinks this gives them the chance to discover where the weapons are going. All Quark has to do is find out for him, which is why Odo deputizes him. Quark's initially amused by the idea until he learns the alternative is throwing him in a cell for obstructing an investigation, so the deputy title is really more of a courtesy. Once Sisko hears what's happening with the Krasari, he decides he needs to visit Bajor to pass it on. Might maybe have called first if it's that important, but he wants to see things for himself too. He's also sticking a bodyguard on Lee Nullas. If the Circle's plan is to destabilize the Bajoran government, maybe Sisko thinks the death of a hero might cause enough confusion or resentment to help it along. Vedek Bareil is waiting to hear about Kira's visions, but she's not really comfortable with sharing what she saw about the two of them having squelchy-squirty come times. Funny thing, though, he says his last vision from that orb involved her, which is partly why he invited her here, like a dirty little bastard. The conversation is cut short by some distant noise, all of which sounds rather too much like combat for Kira's liking. And speaking of combat, Vedek Sin, the Delphic douchebag, sticks her oar in too. It's all very formal and polite, and each word makes it entirely clear that she thinks Kira is a sack of shit who isn't welcome here. Not sure I'd be getting rid of the one military representative during civil unrest, but Kira did accuse her of an assassination attempt, so I suppose she's got a right to be a bit miffed, even if it was true. Speaking of the military, Sisko's here to have a word with them. He starts by probing if the military's hesitance to engage the Circle might indicate divided loyalties, something rejected outright by the general he's speaking to. That seems to satisfy Sisko, and he shares what he knows about the weapon shipments Quark mentioned to Odo. It's certainly news to the general, and we say we'll keep him informed when he expresses an interest in knowing where those munitions are going to. Sisko also asks after Kira and that he'd like her back on Deep Space Nine if possible. The general can't help with it, but is at least impressed that Sisko didn't try to use news about the weapon shipments to barter for her return, so we've made an ally if nothing else. Maybe he'll be even more happy with us if we can find out where the guns are going. Dax and Lee Nullas have been stalling the Krasari ship while we think up a plan, much to their annoyance, but we eventually let them go after checking all the goods on their official cargo manifest. As they prepare to leave, apart from the container that O'Brien was moving, shapeshifts into a rat and scurries off. Sisko's ready to return to DS9, but thinks a visit to see Kira would be welcome first. She's not up to date on just how bad things are in the capital, and Sisko shares the details, along with his concerns that the military might not be as committed to the current government as the general he spoke to suggested. There's nothing he can do about it here, though, so after mentioning that he's still trying to get her back, he leaves for DS9. A slight problem, though, he's not the only one interested in where Kira ends up, as she's currently being kidnapped by some monks wearing masks. To Odo briefly, and he's watching, through his little ratty eyes, the Krasari captain conduct some business. A cardigan teleports over with a crate that we can probably assume isn't Yamak sauce, and then buggers off again after thumbing some paperwork. I guess that answers who's ultimately behind all this business with the Circle on Bajor, but we still need to meet the Bajoran in charge of them. It's none other than the minister who had a pop at Kira for rescuing Lee Nullas and then carted him off to DS9 out of the way. Lee Nullas is too much like competition for the minister's liking, and he wants this all to go smoothly. And that's also why he wants to know what Kira thinks the Federation will do once his coup kicks off. Kira's not feeling talkative though, so it's time for a bit of the old torture. Kira's disappearance has been noticed and reported back to Sisko by Vedek Bareil. Her rescue isn't going to be high on the list for Bajor's military with everything going on, but Lee Nullas will try to use his reputation as a cudgel. In the meantime, it's down to us, so I guess it's handy that Odo's new deputy has managed to find out where the Circle are holding up. Odo's not back yet, so we'll assume it's from Quark's dodgy contacts. That's good enough for Sisko, and off we go on the assumption that their headquarters is where Kira will be, which feels like kind of a stretch for people who've spent 50 years perfecting the concept of isolated resistance cells, but maybe these ones are shit at it or something. Lee Nullas manages to blag his way onto the team too, arguing that fighting is one of the few things he actually knows how to do. Here's hoping all his opponents are unarmed and in their underwear. O'Brien flies them over to Bajor and teleports all 5 of the rescue team down in one go, which is a little more than a megashuttle's 2-person teleporter limit that we established when we rescued Lee Nullas in the last episode, but let's ignore that for now. Pooping ensues, during which both of the unnamed Bajoran security officers get hit, so it's nice to know that Starfleet aren't the only ones who make incompetent guards. Bashir spots, then unties Kira and takes a glancing blow for his troubles. The poopy is pooped on in turn by Lee Nullas as Kira grabs the spare comm badge that Bashir was holding and they all teleport away. Well, maybe. One of the hit security guards was grabbed by Lee Nullas, but it's possible we left the other one behind. Maybe 5 is the new limit. Back to Deep Space Nine we go, and discover Bashir's perfectly fine now and tending Kira's wounds. Maybe he just fell over and the shot missed him entirely. Anywho, Odo's back too, and he nicked the paperwork carrying a cardigan thumbprint. Now we can prove the Circle are being armed by cardigans, albeit without their knowledge. We can show the Bajoran people that this whole thing is a plot to cause civil unrest and get rid of the Federation so the cardigans can come back in and give them another kicking. It'll sound better coming from Lee Nullas, so we try making a call on his behalf. The slight problem, though, we can't get through. Somebody's blocking calls, which probably means the Minister and his mates are going ahead with their coup right now. The answer is, sort of. The Minister thinks he's going to pull this off, but it'll be a lot easier to survive the aftermath with some religious support on his side. Vedek Sin might be willing to come out publicly in his favour, but thinks such an endorsement would carry more weight if she was the new Kai. The two come to an agreement, each likely wondering which of them will be the first to stab the other in the back. We return to DS9 and find Sisko talking to an admiral at Starfleet Command. Based on the way things are going, and the 2 Bajoran ships on their way here right now to take control of the station and eject all aliens, the Admiral thinks it's probably time to bugger off. He's rather insistent, in fact, and says staying would be a prime directive issue, as this is an internal Bajoran matter regardless of the unknown cardigan influence we've discovered. Sisko's well versed in the concept of malicious compliance, though. He's been ordered to evacuate, and that's exactly what he'll do. But a full Federation evacuation must, naturally, include all technology and equipment. Leaving any of it here would constitute an outside influence, and he's been told that's not allowed. Of course, that means we'll all still be here when those Bajoran ships arrive, but I guess we'll have to deal with that in the next episode, as we're told the story is to be continued. Another installment of Bajoran political intrigue, and unless the comment section wishes to correct me, I think the first example of a Star Trek story spanning more than 2 parts. Establishing that this is all just the consequence of a cardigan plot to destabilise and retake Bajor raises some questions. Perhaps recent internal political changes have given the military, who didn't want the withdrawal in the first place, more say over events. Or it's possible the discovery of the wormhole has changed the minds of those who initially ordered the departure. Maybe it's not even officially sanctioned, just something being performed by members of the military without formal oversight. Perhaps they think their ruling body will reconsider if they see Bajor weakened and the Federation withdrawing. Having a civil war kill off a fair chunk of the people with combat experience is certainly a strong opening move for an invasion. It's not spelled out for us in detail, which I'd argue is preferable under the circumstances, as there was no logical place in the story to pass that on to us. Any lore dump performed during the episode would probably have felt contrived, so it's better to leave the question open in this case, and it gives us something to play with in the process. Elsewhere, we're given the first hints of something between Kira and Vedek Bareil. Their less-than-subtle interactions show where that could go, whilst also providing some data that Bajoran religious factions aren't necessarily the chaste institutions that you might expect when you think about faith. When you have such a strongly devout population, I suppose it makes sense not to tie sexual taboos to it, or there'd be fewer and fewer Bajorans in each new generation. Their scenes in the monastery also give us a potentially deeper observation, though. Bareil brought her to the monastery because of what he saw in an orb vision, the implication being he wouldn't have done otherwise. Which in turn makes us ask if the so-called orb of prophecy is just that, or could be better described as the orb of self-fulfilling prophecy. Do events come to pass because that's what the people involved were shown? Are those who witnessed them being given visions or instructions? Some of you may be familiar with a little-known science fiction story called Dune, which I believe was relatively well received back in the day and had a sequel or 2. One of the main powers in that universe was the Bene Gesserit, basically space witches who exploit superstition. Part of their methodology was to seed ideas into populations, prophecy and legend that their own agents can then fulfill in order to sway the masses. If that sounds familiar, it's because you might have just watched it here. It's possible that the visions being given by the orb are much the same, images provided to a people who hold them in such high regard that they'll then consider the matter to be already settled, even as they work to make it real. It may not even be intentional, as we learned in the pilot that the aliens who launched these orbs didn't intend for them to encounter corporeal beings. Or maybe that was bollocks and the whole chat with Sisko was an attempt at plausible deniability for their societal engineering of Bajor. We're not prophets, we didn't even know you existed. Nothing to do with us, Gov. Questions and questions and questions then, but there is one thing that we know for sure from this episode. Benny Sisko decides to take a big old shite on the Prime Directive. Again. For those of you already furiously typing out your comments condemning me, I'll clarify that this is a factual judgment rather than a moral one. I've got vague memories of an old original series episode where Kirk interferes with the development of a species to correct the interference of another. I'm sure we could have a long discussion on how the principles of the Prime Directive have changed and are, arguably, both much less useful and far harder to enforce now, but that doesn't change what happened. Sisko was told specifically to bug out and created a reason not to. But he's not alone here in that approach, is he? Both Major Kira and Constable Odo consider doing what's right to be higher on their list of importance than doing what they were told. They've been here for far longer than him and know what works. So how much of the decision was him and how much of it came from the influence of those he found here when he arrived? And if it's the latter, would imposing our own principles of non-interference have, ironically, acted as a greater influence on the situation than following the lead of those who already know the system? Come to think of it, maybe Sisko's behaviour was just another question after all. End of episode.
So much for a new background.
Screw the new background. I want to know why the other version of me had such a better voice than I do.
Oh, Don, that were a flashback. You're not supposed to hear it.
I don't care. I want a better voice. I've been robbed.
If you're that bothered by it, I'll just switch it.
How the hell are you going to switch it?
I'll use the button.
The what?
The button on the back of your head, the one that says Psycho Voice.
Are you telling me there's been a button on the back of my head this whole time?
Well, yeah. I assumed you knew about it. It's literally on your head.
God damn it. I could have switched it ages ago.
And it'll be handy if you do, too, as the guy who makes these says YouTube's been content flagging his videos and he has to appeal all of them. Been going on for a couple of months, but it didn't happen on the season summary. Did a test on the last video and tracked it down to something in these end credits, meaning it's probably your voice.
Wait. Was the whole thing with the French dogs just to change my voice?
Actually, he'd written all of that before he found out, so this is genuinely just an happy coincidence that fits in with Space Dog canon.
Okay, enough with the fourth wall nonsense. I want a new voice. Push the button.
Alright then, let's see if this really is a voice button or if it's plugged into the kill switch Jen we're secretly installed.
The what switch?
Nothing. Woof.